Hey everyone. Alright, so Joey Vision Tampa asks, what would you change about your portfolio now to make yourself more hireable to employers at the time you were looking for your first job? So, I can tell you, I think I spent about 6 months on my portfolio and I constantly refactored it all the time. And so I remember spending so much time on my portfolio. I was a perfectionist, and the problem was I didn't spend any time on other projects. Building a portfolio isn't interesting. You're not solving an interesting problem. It doesn't tell your potential employer anything about you. So a lot of people will focus on a pretty portfolio when you need to focus on why you're even building the portfolio in the first place. It's to showcase your projects, other projects that solve interesting problems. So this is where I would encourage you, spend very little time on your portfolio. I honestly, this position and my last position, my portfolio was non-existent. There are other things that I did like I worked on projects. I had other personal projects, but to actually have a portfolio, it wasn't needed. So it can be very effective. I promise you, a portfolio can be very effective, especially for front-end positions. But don't spend all of your time on the portfolio itself. In fact, if you find yourself stressing out about how you need to make this portfolio look perfectly for employers, right? It's the first thing they see. If it looks terrible, they're going to leave right away. And that's just not always the truth. So if you find yourself in that position, in that mindset, what I would encourage you to do, and this is going to be very hard, literally put up a WordPress site, download a free WordPress theme with something to be able to showcase your portfolio. So make sure that theme is built to do that, and then focus on the personal projects. Those are interesting problems. Those are relatable problems that employers can get behind, that they can have interesting conversations with you and hopefully kind of relate to some of the product work or some of even the client work that they're working on. So I think number one mistake people make with a portfolio is spending too much time on the actual portfolio itself. Now, if you have 3 personal projects up, they look good, you're comfortable with them, then go back and touch up your portfolio. There's nothing wrong with that. But honestly, if I had to go back, I would put less emphasis on my portfolio. I would put more emphasis on completing my personal projects because I had dozens of incomplete personal projects. And so, like, just looking back, a lot of them were solving interesting problems, but there was nothing to show for it. They weren't done. They were broken. So that's my advice. Don't spend so much time on your portfolio itself. But let's think about like what kind of information you want to deliver on a portfolio. And so if you're a writer, I highly encourage you to write about kind of just your development process. And as you're growing, just write about it, what you're learning. So a lot of very effective portfolios, what you'll see case studies alongside the actual project. So you'll be able to go to the project. If it's open source, you'll be able to see the code, which is really good for CTOs or any hiring manager to just dig into. And it creates interesting conversations. When they can see that code, it kind of helps solidify a little bit more confidence that you actually do know how to code. They might test you on that, and they still might give you personal projects or just whatever way the company wants to test you on that. But hopefully you keep that public, you show the code, you show a live site, and when I talk about a case study, I talk about, let's actually keep this really, really simple. Talk about the technologies that you used, that you worked on, especially if you learned any new technologies, had to pick up any new libraries for it. Talk about that, and even just list that. But talk about kind of the objectives, the problem you were trying to solve, and how you went about solving that problem, kind of hiccups, plateaus you hit that just kind of stumped you and you had to figure out how to get past that. Being able to talk about that, especially in a blog post, which is amazing if you want to do that. Giving the developer a little bit more of your thought process and how you solve that problem it's kind of just giving you a step forward in the interview before you even get to the interview. But talk about the technologies and the hurdles that you faced, the problems you solved, and if you gained a user base behind it or you built it for a client. Those are two great things to mention. When you have someone using your product and you have numbers to represent that, that just makes that portfolio project that much more powerful. So portfolio projects are key on a portfolio. I think a couple mistakes people make on their portfolio projects that they'll submit with their resume when they do cold applications and they just send their resume out. They focus a lot on putting their resume on their portfolio. So they'll put skill charts, they'll put all of the technologies, like every single one, and all the libraries they learned, everything on their portfolio website. And they'll talk about, they'll have a pretty large blurb about them. Like it's great to personalize your portfolio and have your portfolio and just the design itself kind of speak to your personality. But when you have paragraphs of text talking about your biography, an employer usually isn't going to initially want to take the time to read all that. I think portfolio projects are key. I think if you have testimonials because you built stuff that gained a user base, you built stuff for clients, and you had just great satisfaction with it, they felt good about the project, they had something great to say about it, put testimonials and stuff like that on the portfolio. And just a simple contact form at the bottom, even very basic, just your email address. So I think the three key things are, any kind of social recognition you've gotten, just to show that what you've built, people use and enjoy, your portfolio projects, and your contact information. I think those three things are essential. Now you can have an about page. You can have extra information. I just don't think it should be the highlight. Like it shouldn't be delivered initially when an employer gets to your portfolio, because they're delivered that with your cover letter and resume. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, when you start diving into creating YouTube videos, you start live streaming your coding projects, you start blogging your development process, that creates whole new opportunities to start bringing in attention that comes to you, especially if you just learn the basics of SEO and kind of just put your website out there, and you're able to kind of just talk about it on social media and talk about the cool things that you're building and just build up a little bit of an audience, a little bit of an attraction. Then that's a whole other strategy, and I can talk more about that. Then we can start highlighting different things on your portfolio. Then we can start talking about different strategies. But the typical aspiring developer is going to cold apply, and so if you do that, you just send out applications and you attach your portfolio with a cover letter, portfolio projects, potentially with a case study or a little bit of information about the portfolio projects. Make sure they're live, make sure there's a repository link to them. What did I mention? Contact form, and there was one other thing I mentioned and I'm completely spacing it, but go back in the video, I did mention it. Keep it simple, don't overcomplicate your portfolio. That's it.
I've been cold to you, but you want nothing to do with me, so hopefully we'll coexist in time.